Welcome to the Thunderbolt Advanced Classroom. Thunderbolt comes up at the end of May this year, and we're looking forward to seeing everyone there. Today's topic is going to be weight transfer. That's related to things we've talked about in the past, and we'll touch on some of that today. But it, like many other things, ties together what the driver needs to do to get the best out of the car. So I hope you take away a few tips from today. If you're an advanced driver, I think you'll find one or two things here that'll cause you to think a little bit. If you're a student driver, you'll see some ideas here that may or may not apply to you, but you'll also find some things that will help you as well. So with that, let's dive right in. As normal, we have the normal disclaimer that says, you try anything here that at your own risk. So why do we want to talk about weight transfer? Well, you're going to see that it's directly impacts on traction and grip, and therefore how well the car gets around the track. So we're going to talk about how to deal with it, how it affects understeer, oversteer, and most importantly, car balance. So for those of you who want to dive into the details, we're not going to do that here today. The key thing here is that we care about weight transfer because grip or traction is proportional to weight. And that's what this formula is telling us. So the grip from a given tire is proportional to the weight on it. And you can think about that in an easy way. Just imagine a pencil with an eraser on it, and you take that eraser and you put it on your piece of paper and you gently erase something. Now do the same thing, but push down hard. And guess what? It's a lot harder to move the pencil across the paper. It's exactly the same with a tire. So the two kinds of weight transfer we're going to talk about today are braking, where when we brake, the weight moves forward. That means more weight on the front, less on the back. And when we when we accelerate, it's the reverse of that, right? Less grip on the front and more on the back. And cornering is the same thing, only now we've moved weight from the left to the right or vice versa. And the key thing here is, I don't care what kind of a car you have, even the most sophisticated race car in the world, their weight transfer happens during cornering. The laws of physics make sure that that happens. As you can see here, even an accentuated, roll, it's really roll we're looking at there more than weight transfer. We tend to think those are correlated, but as we'll see, they're not. So if we think a little bit harder about what does the model look like, there's some rules of thumb if we do the math in some of those formulas that tell us that the lateral weight transfer, and those of you who are engineers and you want to call it load transfer, that may be technically more correct. It's about 30% of the weight, side to side. Whereas when we brake, we move about 20% of the weight. And again, that varies some, but those give us some rules of thumb. So if we apply that to a 3,000-pound Porsche, like you're probably driving on the track or me, that would mean under full braking of 1G, we're moving 300 pounds onto each front tire, 600 pounds in total. And guess what? Those same 600 pounds came off the back. So yes, the front has more grip, but the back has less. And when we think about cornering, it's more like 500 pounds a tire. So lots of weight being moved, which directly impacts how well the car handles. Here's the formulas. I'm not going to spend any time on them, but they're here for those who are interested. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today on car setup and so on, but here's one slide to give you some guidance if that's something you're interested in. These weight transfers or lateral loads do cause the car to roll, as we saw in those earlier photos. But in fact, more weight transfer means less grip. And the graph you see here explains that, because the amount of grip that you get when you press down on that pencil eraser is not linear. The harder you press, the grip doesn't go up quite as much as the weight does. And that's what you see in the graph here. So, and we'll see that in a simpler fashion in a minute as well. So the front versus rear roll stiffness is really critical in terms of the amount the car rolls, and later you're going to see it affects balance. Now, if you're looking at car setup, the general rule is to soften the end of the car that needs more grip. So if the back needs more grip, meaning the car is tending to oversteer, you would put a softer sway bar on the back or softer springs. However, often with cars, street cars, like most of us drive on the track, the reverse can be the case. So this is a case where suspension and adjustments and so on tend to be a bit of a black art. So you hope you have good advice and a good mechanic to help you with some of those sorts of things. But here are some basic vehicle dynamics that you're welcome to dive into more. And if you have questions in that area, I'm no expert, but I can point you at a few more resources if you're interested in that. So how do we deal with weight transfer? It's inevitable, but doing it quickly is really bad. We want weight to move, load to move once and smoothly. And as that graph earlier pointed out, less is better. And that's because as we corner that outside, tire's gain for every pound that we move inside to outside is the gain is less than the loss on the inside. And the same is true when we brake. So if we apply this to how we want the car to handle in terms of both setup and how we want it to handle based on the inputs we provide, balance really ends up being more important because balance means the car feels right to the driver. And if it doesn't feel right to the driver, even if the car has a lot of grip, the driver isn't going to be able to do very well. And so race drivers and pro drivers spend a lot of time getting the car balanced to their particular style. So for what that means for you and me is we have to avoid preconceived ideas and copying other people and understand our car and what handling issues it has as we drive it. And if you're not feeling that the car has handling issues, then forget about all this stuff and just focus on driving the car. Because your level of skill may not have gotten to the point where it matters. Modern Porsches are so good that they can be driven very well, even with some, what by standards of a few years ago might be a minor issue. But point being, if the car isn't talking to you in some way, then don't worry about it. Just drive and get your driving better. And an important corollary to that is you can't really judge how well the car is handling unless you're driving very consistently. In other words, if you're driving, through a given corner at 65 miles an hour one time and 68 another time and 63 another time, then you don't have a baseline that gives you a feeling for what the car is really doing. So with that said, let's dive into some ideas here. How do you figure this stuff out? How do you know whether the car is understeering, oversteering, doing both? You've heard me talk about this before, but it's going to come up again here. Sensory input sessions. Go out and focus on sound. What are the tires making noise at any given point in time? Are they telling you something? Some tires do, some don't. But certainly the seat of the pants, the feel in the steering wheel. Are your fingertips, are you using just your lightweight grip on the wheel, not a death grip, to feel what the steering wheel is telling you as you turn the car in. And of course, even your vision tells you whether the car is consistently on the same path in a given corner each time. And is it on the path that you intended it to be on? And of course, if PSM is kicking in, then you know something's not right that you need to fix. And you need to figure that out. And we'll talk more about being a detective in a minute. Now, of course, weight transfer is driven by the control. So this is basic 101 level stuff, but I want to make a couple points here. We always want the car to turn and take a set and do that in a smooth fashion, something you can practice on the road every day. Sometimes we want to, as the slide says, turn progressively. That that may mean we turn a little less at the beginning and then a little more, or we may need to turn more slowly or more quickly, depending on the corner. So steering refinements can be made and should be made based on a given corner and based on your car and how it's handling today. Shifting, it should be obvious. I mean, if you have a PDK, this is less of an issue, but if you have a manual, every shift you make is going to upset the car at least a little bit, and it takes a certain amount of time. And so we want to learn to do that smoothly. The three-step method is pretty basic. It means every shift, whether up or down, has three motions in the gate: out of gear, across the gate, into gear. And again, if you drive a manual transmission every day, you can practice that and get really good at it. Now, braking, of course, is the hardest part of the balance to really learn. The basics here that we talk to students about all the time: move that foot quickly onto the brake pedal, hard initial pressure, and then gentle release. Much easier said than done, as we all know. And as you've gotten experience, you've heard me and many other people talk about focusing on the end of braking. We want to be consistent where we come off the brakes in terms of the consistent point, as well as the consistent pace, so that we have a very smooth brake release and that's consistent in any given corner, lap after lap. So let's think about some things that could cause weight transfers that could cause understeer. The car's going to understeer if there's not enough weight on the front tires. Well, what could cause that? We could release the brakes too quickly entering a corner, especially a slower corner like turn 5 or turn 9. And now all of a sudden, the front doesn't have the same amount of grip, and the car, even if it's a small understeer, the car just doesn't quite make the apex the way that you intended. And that's a case, again, of releasing the brakes too quickly. Now, of course, the car can understeer if we are getting on the gas hard, especially coming out of a slower corner, and we still have the front tires turned. The car will obviously understeer in that case. And how aggressively we use the steering wheel can also cause the same sort of understeer to happen. So how do you fix it? Well, usually it means more or longer trail braking if it's in the early part of the corner, and smoother brake release. Those two things may or may not always go together, but smoother turn-in can help. And if the car feels like it's understeering as you turn in, perhaps it needs a little more brake, a little more trail brake, but perhaps it needs a slower turn-in. So think about the interaction there and try a little bit of each and see which happens. Which brings me to my comment about being a detective. Most of you watching this have a fair amount of experience. And so if you feel like the car is understeering, in other words, it's not, you turn the wheel and it's not behaving the way you want, time to put your detective hat on and figure out why is there not enough weight to cause the car to turn, and what do I have to do to solve that? So think about it in terms of, the weight that's on the front end of the car in this case, and what can I do to get myself a little more weight to help the car turn, the way I want. Again, in the early part of the corner. If the car is understeering as you're exiting the corner, well, should be a pretty simple thing, and frankly, shouldn't be something an experienced driver should experience very much of. Here's the reverse. Oversteer can easily be caused by too much trail brake, right? We can get into a corner and crank the car in with a lot of trail brake, and now guess what? The back end's light. All that weight on the front came from someplace. It came from the back, and now the back end doesn't want to stay stuck. Obviously, if we lift in the wrong place where the car isn't straight, and guess what? That can happen in turn 9 at Thunderbolt. Or you can get, too much brakes carried deep into a corner like 10, a slow corner, back end could step out, for similar to the first one here. And of course, there's always power oversteer where, if you have enough power to slide the back end exiting a slower corner, that one's the easier one to fix. That means more judicious with the right foot. These others, probably mean less trail braking. They certainly mean a smoother brake release. And again, they may benefit from more progressive steering input. And again, if you're experiencing oversteer, then put that detective hat back on and figure out why isn't there enough weight on the back tires. And I think you'll find the answer. Now, here's some interesting perspective from Randy Popes. His view is understeer is slow, but oversteer is scary. And I think most of us, I certainly would agree with that. In a perfect world, we don't want either one. We want balance, and that requires moving weight when and where you choose to do so. And you see some comments here from experts who comment about how smooth all of the use of the controls are. And if you think about what you're doing with the controls is moving hundreds and hundreds of pounds of weight around, should be an incentive, a mental incentive to make those control movements as smooth, as precise, and carefully as possible. Now, how do we practice? Well, I've already talked about sensory input sessions, but I'm going to take that the next step and talk about deliberate practice, which again, you've heard me talk about this before. The basically says how you practice is more important than the amount. And you see in the red box here, what that means: focus in a focused way with clear goals, a plan, and a way to monitor progress. And the sensory input sessions, can cover all of the things that are on the slide here: brake application, brake release, throttle, steering, all the things we've been talking about. And the website has deliberate practice worksheets on it that you can find this sheet on the left and use track maps that are also on the website to make your notes. Having been able to do that a few times myself, it's really a terrific way to really hone your skills in a given area. Of course, we're talking about knowing what to do versus being able to execute it. And that's where seat time comes in. No substitute for seat time, because these are complex things we're trying to do, and it's not necessarily simple. And I like the way Yogi Berra said it best. In theory and practice are the same. In practice, they are not. So just keep that in mind. We're talking about executing skills that even pro drivers, work on it every day. So to summarize, remember you're moving large amounts of weight around every time you turn the steering wheel or use the brake pedal or the gas pedal. And so if we improve that weight transfer, we improve the amount of grip we have, and that requires being smoothness. I don't know what happened to my slide here. It was supposed to say the objective is balance. We want the car to be balanced, and to do that, especially if you're having any issues, we need to learn to be a weight transfer detective. So keep that detective hat handy, and if you're seeing any of these issues, try to figure out what's going on. And if you need help, certainly ask around, ask any of the chiefs. Lots of other resources around that you should take advantage of. With all that said, I will plan to see you at Thunderbolt. Following this in just a minute, there will be a turn-by-turn for Thunderbolt. Okay. All right, so let me jump into turn-by-turn. Same disclaimers before. If you haven't already, before you go to Thunderbolt, go to the NNJR site and print out several copies of the Thunderbolt track map where you can make notes. It's in the track map section of the website. Hopefully everybody's doing that. Passing zones, everybody here probably knows what the passing zones are. They're, with the exception of the zone between 5 and 6, the mandatory zones in the lower groups are all right side, except the section between 5 and 6, which could be either side depending on where in the zone you give the signal. Obviously in red and black, there are additional places to pass with expanded passing. So let's talk about the corners. And thanks to Doug Holcomb for providing me some GPS overlay diagrams that made it a lot easier to draw in the line. With the caveat that the line I've shown here, I drew in freehand, so it's not perfect, but hopefully it gives you the general idea. Turn 1 is a relatively quick corner, but it's at the end of the front straight. So we're coming from high speed into, probably in most cars, 4th to 3rd or 5th to 3rd gear corner. 3rd gear in most cars, I think. It's uphill, so that helps the car turn and get pointed some. So there's nothing magic about this, but it is a corner rather, where too many people have tried to take it too early or too fast, but especially too early. So yes, the hill will help slow down the car, but only to a certain extent. And so if we get the line right, it's a pretty quick corner. The other comment I'll make is that for some of us, if you notice the track out curb here, that curb, yes, you can run up on it as insurance if you want to do that, but there's a kind of a groove between the asphalt and the curb there that in my car and in some other cars will actually grab and kind of just, make the car want to go straight there. Now, it's not the end of the world, but it can catch you out. So just be aware that the curb there isn't as friendly as we might like. And as I'm going through here, if you have questions on any given corner, I'm going to go fairly fast, but please jump in with comments or questions as we go through. Turn 2 is just up the hill. There's a crest of the hill right in here, right before the apex, actually. And so it's blind. This is a blind corner. Those of you who are at pit race will have lots of practice with blind corners, but this is a blind corner where we turn in and we really don't see most of the corner at that point. And then we also have to, as we track out, we have to be aware that cars pitting out could be on our right side here, because pit out happens right opposite track out of turn 2 here. This corner is relatively fast, but it feels to me like the track kind of comes back a bit. So it's quite easy to overdrive this corner and get in too fast and run out of road. That said, if you get it right, it's a pretty quick corner and feeds onto a nice, chute. So there's a benefit here of carrying speed once we figure the line out. Definitely a corner to turn in a bit late and apex a bit late until you really have it figured out. Turn 3 is a fast corner in the back, and this is a classic little bit of trail brake, not a lot of trail brake, and back on the gas. So a little bit of brake to tuck the nose in, back on the gas, apex the second part of the curb here, and track out, near the end of the track out curb in the back. Pretty quick corner in the back, and feeds onto the second chute, if you will, in the back, a longer chute between 3 and 4. So turn 4 is the one Tom mentioned before, and this is one of the few corners on the track where I'm going to suggest you do want to use the apex curb, because it does help flatten the corner out quite a bit. And this is a corner where, to Tom's point, we want to turn in, again, just like turn 3, we got to slow down a little bit more here for 4 than we might have for 3, just because we're going a lot faster. But this is still a quick corner, especially if we do 2 things. If we use the apex curb, number 1, and number 2, don't worry too much about our entrance to turn 5. And so if we do those 2 things, we slow down a bit, we turn in, we get back on the gas, as Tom suggested, run over the apex curb, and carry a lot of speed, into the very short chute now between 4 and 5. So that when we get down to this area here, we're tracking out, but there's not a lot of real estate between here and 5. And so, as we're going to see in a minute, that's going to position us, we won't be track right entering turn 5 if we do that. But for most people, that trade-off is one worth making. And here's turn 5, the one that lots of people overdrive, because it's slower than a lot of people think. And it's a bit downhill going in, so that doesn't help either. And I mean, there's nothing particularly fancy about this corner. It's a 90-degree, roughly left-hand corner, but we're coming into it very fast. And that means we got to slow down a lot. And there's this nice long stretch after it. So we want to exit the corner fast. So this needs to be a slow in, fast out corner. So lots of brake. And as you can see, as you can see, the line that we've drawn here, we never got track right. Normally, we'd want to be over here by the turn-in point, right? By the time we got to this point. But if we carry speed through 4, that's not possible. Yes, you can go through 4 slow enough to end up track right, but the trade-off isn't worth it. And and so almost everybody drives this to no more than the center of the track in this section here, and turning into what's a late apex on this curb, for 5, from the middle of the track, and lots of trail brake here. It's we're scrubbing off speed. We can trail the brakes a fairly long way into this corner, before we get on the gas to come out. If I can get this to move for me.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. This corner here, 5, is one of those. I think you brought us like 2 really good points. Is when you want to travel through 4 at a higher speed, the temptation to try to get all the way track right for 5 avoid it. And students would typically do it. Oh, I got to get back to the right. No, you don't. And they think about that as like, oh, I got to get back over to the right side, and everything gets discombobulated. And a number of people will call this turn 5. I call it the autocross corner. But you do have to understand, going in slow, coming out fast, and that late apex. And that's one of the real special points about this corner when you're teaching students.
Yep. So here's an overhead of the whole complex. I guess I should have drawn the red in, so it's a little bit hard to see. But from here, you can see that the distance between 4 and 5 is pretty short. So if we come booking through 4, it's physically impossible to get back. And the speed difference between being able to book through 4 fast and end up mid-track versus slowing down enough to end up track right, the speed difference in 4 is pretty substantial. So unless you were driving a really, really low powered car, and even then I'm not sure, because in a low powered car, the line that's here, is shorter than getting back track right as well. So anyway, this is a bit of an unusual circumstance, but not really when you really analyze what's going on. 6 is another fairly fast right-hand corner. And I want to emphasize here, and should have on probably some of the earlier ones, the apex here is fairly long. It's not just a point in the middle of the curb. We're going to run along the curb for some distance here, 10 or 20 feet or whatever, maybe more, because we're going to brush the brakes or a little more depending how much horsepower you have, and then we're going to turn the car back in and start to squeeze the gas. It's a fast corner, and we're going to smooth it out as much as we can. Nothing. It may require a little more brake than you at first think. At first, you think it's faster than it is. At least that was my reaction when I first drove it. But it's still a quick corner. You can still get through here at a very good pace. Now, this gets into the whole area called the octopus, which most people really think of as the area in here around turn 10 and 9, 10, 11A. But this is the whole complex, seen from above, starting with 7, which kind of 7 not so much, but 8 sets up 9, 10, and 11. So 7 is another apex zone. This is a bit slower than 6, so this does require we're going faster than we were coming into 6, and B, it's a right-hand corner, but it is slower. Notice it's almost 90 degrees. So it's a slower corner than 6, but still not a slow corner. The interesting thing here at turn 7 is that we really want to exit this and make one big arc all the way from 7 over to 9. And so this is a fairly quick section, but it takes some getting used to because it's not straight. And in particular, when we get to the end, when we get over here and we want to slow down, it's hard to figure out how to brake. So there are several strategies that can be employed over in here. One is to kind of straighten the car out a bit here and brake in a bit of a straight line before turning in for turn 9. Another one is to just trail brake gently, for a very, very long time. 9 is a very slow corner that we're entering. 8 is this kind of big arc. So it almost, I don't even think of it as a corner. I just think about how do I get from 7 to the braking zone for 9. But, thinking about what our braking zone is going to be as we get over here and how we're setting up 9, a very slow corner, is what this section is all about. And again, depending on how fast we come through here, is going to influence kind of and how our car behaves and think about car control, if you're comfortable, kind of slowing the car down a lot, with partial brake while you're turning, then you can, slow the car down on kind of this line right here. If you're not comfortable doing that, or your car doesn't feel comfortable to you doing that, then you're going to have to straighten the wheel some at some point here to slow the car down and then turn right into turn 9. All right. So
Bill, if I can add just to that corner, one of the, if I think I see one or two, if not two, first-time instructors on this call. One of the big things that happens at that turn-in that Bill's drawing the line on, two things tend to happen. We tend to put a cone, or the track tends to put a cone out in the horizon on the left side of the track at that turn-in point, and many students get fixated on that cone and lose track of where the turn-in is. So it's kind of like an orientation point. I think the biggest is one of the corners that is the most inconsistent corners, where students will constantly, they're on the left or on the right or in the middle, they turn in early, turn in late, is get them to turn their head to the right. See that corner, that cone out in the distance? Yeah, it's fine. It's something that's out there. But look at their head. If they turn their head to the right, they can really master that turn in and roll the car into that corner. Look for that. Look at them. Look at their head. Look at their eyes. Thanks.
Yep. No, that's great input. That's great input.
Bill, just a quick question for you. Just the curb on the inside, the line you've got there is quite a long way from that curb. So we should just ignore that curbing on the inside and try and stay out there.
Oh, the curbing in here, Grant?
And yeah, in the middle of the curve there.
It really depends on what arc you and your car like. And I would ignore the curbing. Yes. If the arc that your car likes gets you close to it, fine. I haven't driven Thunderbolt in a few years, so I actually don't remember for sure how close to that curb I was. The key thing is how much space can I carry on a nice, arc that the car likes through here. So this is car and driver dependent. And if you find a line that you and the car like, then go for it. Because, it's obviously a curvy section. We can't just, straighten the front wheel and put our right foot down. So we're just trying to carry, as much pace as we can up to the braking zone for 9. And so I don't think there's one solution here, Grant, for everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so exactly as you were saying, Bill, depending on the car and the speed, depending which car I drove in the past, I tried to get closer and then inching out to the left slowly. The next section, as you go into 9, you're going to feel how much you're fighting your car. And it's going to be really difficult if you overdrive it, or you are too close or too far from the ideal point and balance of the car. So once you really get to that right turn into 9, you're going to have to modify your next lap to go away from this fighting the car, need to brake extra, and not being able to smoothly transition to the left into 10. It's really a little bit of a trial and error.
Right. I mean, there is, to Grant's point, I mean, there is, I don't know that I can show it very well. I think you can see my pointer on the screen, but there is a line. You could make an arc that starts at the same point as the current red line, but that came in closer to the curb and then comes out further here, not all the way track left, but closer to where the end of this arrow is, and then make a more distinct turn in for turn 9. There is, and obviously we're braking in this section anyway. So that kind of line allows you to relax, open the wheel a bit, brake in a little bit more of a straight line to scrub off some speed and then trail in. So there are a variety of options to think about here. And if you're not comfortable with the one you're doing or not sure, you can always try, different options, through here. So
yeah. I think that's a good, and both Laszlo and Bill, I mean, I can remember when we first went to T-Bolt, it was, let's double apex this. And that's kind of where they, in some cars, probably it made sense. You got that first set of rumble strips. But you can see exactly where you have your arrowhead there, Bill. There's like a dirt patch, and a lot of people, well, the racers mainly, because they're trying to protect the inside.
Yeah, right here,
but, yeah. So they kind of create, and I know in my car, whether I was in my GT3 or now in a GT4, I want to travel as fast as I can around that whole arc, and then get to the car to the right around where you have the arrow point and that turn in, and get the car straight, get the brakes, and then trail in. But again, when we're all high-level drivers here, so you have to balance that with your car. And those of you who are first-time instructors, it's forget that first set of rumble strips. Just get them around the corner and turn their head, because they're lost. Just get them to turn their head at the turning point.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah,
Guys,
that
I have a
turning
question.
the head, that's a good message to all of us, but fully agree, Tom. Literally, the student has to find me. Look at me. If you don't see my helmet, forget it. You're gonna go straight, and we're gonna have to stop.
Absolutely. Look at me. That's a very, very good little hint there. That's good.
That's good. Somebody else had a comment.
Yeah, just a quick question. This in turn 9, isn't that a little bit off camber if you go out to the right, the left side? Is it off camber a bit, if I remember?
Turn
9.
Turn 9. Well, it's let me go to turn 9. Anthony, I don't remember. It's certainly not helpful out there. So whether it's off camber or not, I don't remember, to tell you the truth. But there is absolutely no reason in the world that we want to be track left here as we get into 9, right? This is a very slow corner, especially since we've now just finished a whole bunch of fast corners. It catches people out, and people want to overdrive it. But we really just want to follow this curbing around. And let me back up for 1 second here. If you look from the overhead here at the whole complex, this is 9, right? And we're headed down here. Well, the natural way, if we just wanted to drive 9, ignoring, and we thought there was a straightaway after, we'd apex it somewhere back here, and we get on the gas and we end up over here someplace. Well, but notice how much the track comes back to the right here. I mean, this is a sharp corner when you consider how much it comes back here, way over 90 degrees, probably close to 120 degrees by the time we're done here. So that's the reason why, if I go the right place here, why we want to stay along this curbing for a long time before, so that we can eventually make a straight line down to this apex down in here. But where I showed the track out arrow on this overhead, that's the track out for 9. But look how far down that is, right? And the reason we're doing that is we're trying to make a straight line from the exit of 9, which is essentially the end of the curbing, all the way to this point. We certainly don't want to be over we don't want to be over in this part of the track at all. We don't want to be track left anywhere in here, because we're traveling more distance, we're making the corner sharper. So that's why the line is very, if you will, odd, if you want to think about it that way, in 9, where, we're basically following this curbing all the way around until we can see, if you will, the beginning of turn 10. And, when people first come to Thunderbolt, they overdrive this corner thinking, well, I can make some speed up. Well, doesn't work. And you can see that here in this overhead of 10. We want to approach it in a straight line from the exit of 9, and we're pretty much going to hug the curbing around here as well. There's not much percentage in getting very far outside of this curb. Some cars will, I see some drivers will be, way, in the right-hand half of the track here, trying to get the car turned and pointed up the track more. But notice, this is a long corner, and it's even worse than that because of where 11A is, right? So, the line here really is pretty much around the curbing. And to Tom's earlier point, you think about this from a car control point of view, what does this look like? It looks like a big skid pad. You can easily experience understeer and oversteer and feel how well the car is balanced going around here, because you get on a little too much gas, the front end's going to wash out. You get on way too much gas and, you'll slide the back end out. Mm-hmm. So, and here in this diagram in particular, you can really see how much it looks like a big wide skid pad.
And to your point, Bill, earlier, unless something changed, what I meant to your earlier point, I myself didn't drive it for a few years. Last time I was there in a fully modified Boxster race car, what I noticed that very close to the curbing, or right on the curbing, and at least in that particular car, there was a significant amount of grip very close to the curbing. And quite frankly, I felt the car was on rails. The further I went out to the right, I felt that I was losing a little bit of a momentum and also less traction. But it's a little bit of a foot right or 2 feet or whatever works for the car. It's a little bit of an experimentation, and absolutely, as you were saying, and Tom before, the skid pad and throttle steering is going to be very important in this turn.
Yep. I think your point about if there is any favorable camber or whatever, it's certainly over in this area here. I mean, if you look at the tire marks in this section of the curbing, the curbing's all black typically in here because everybody's running right up on the curb. So it certainly felt to me like the grip, the most grip was right in tight here, less obvious, in through here, but this is pretty flat. There's not much favorable camber either way that I remember. And so there's certainly no gain being out here that I'm aware of. And you're just going more distance, making, your life that much harder, in my opinion.
And pointing out the black tire markings in general, not just for ourselves as good marker points, but for the students to kind of support what you're trying to teach them. It's fairly obvious, to your point, Bill, where the racers are putting the cars.
Yep.
It's very, very easy to spot and show them, and that can help also memorize a little bit better, especially in the early runs where there's so many different things they need to remember.
Yep. Let me back up just 1 second. I want to point out here, that, the reason one of the reasons we hug this exit curb longer than we might think in 10 is notice what happens in 11A. Well, before 11A, the track, continues to come back on us past this curb. So if we started to accelerate hard exiting out of 10, we end up over here, when in fact, we kind of want to be track left to set up this complex. So So this is another case, just like 9, where we have to hold the apex longer than we might think, because of the section that follows, which is 11A and 11B, because, this sets up the whole front straight. And to enter 11A properly, we need to be track left, which means we need to hold that apex in 10 much longer than we might think before we get back on the gas. And then if we do that properly, now we can be on the gas, through 11A and 11B and set up the front straight. So the whole series of connected corners, and you kind of have to work backwards to understand why the line is where it is.
Bill?
Yep.
My observation from driving the Octopus was this is where people who have a little more car control experience, like the autocrossers, have a slight advantage because they understand the interconnectedness of the corners, plus this whole being able to use their throttle to get around there. This is what separates the autocrossers from the boys. I mean, from the track drivers.
Well, I won't disagree with that. So certainly autocross experience helps the first few times you see this, for sure. So 12, last corner, fast late apex corner that leads onto the front straight. This is the other place where we can use the lower part of the curb, to come on the front straight, but we want to use it carefully. If you're early on turn 12, then drive the car off, slow down in the grass, slow down some more, and then think about getting back on. This corner eats cars, right? Because if you misjudge it, you don't, and try to keep the car on the track, nothing good's going to happen. So it's a fun corner. It's fast, but it requires the appropriate respect since it is a fast corner, and the curb, depending on how you hit the curb. I mean, if you hit it properly, it's in most cars, it's not going to upset the car. But if you hit too much curb, it can upset the car, or if you hit it at the wrong angle. So not a corner to be early, but a fun corner done properly and carrying speed out of 11A and 11B. All right. So just to summarize, a few cautions. We've talked about all these. Don't early apex 1. Watch track out or pit out cars coming into turn 2. Turn 5, slow in, fast out. Don't overdrive the Octopus. Randy Pope's fastest way through a slow corner. Slow. It's a slow corner. 12, don't be early. Watch out for that high curb. And any place on Thunderbolt or any track for that matter, if you're early or too fast, just drive the car off, slow it down some more, then count to 10, and then think about coming back on. But that, everybody on this call should kind of know that.